art, which means I leave impressions of myself all over the ski slopes and trees and stuff. So like I came up on this big jump, and I thought I could take it because I saw the snowboarders doing it. Well, snowboards and skis are very different. Namely, you have two skis to one board. And so when I came up over the top of the jump, I noticed that there was basically a big rut driven into the snow where all the snowboards had landed, and there was no way I could fit both skis in there. And as I came flying up over the top of that jump, I realized something. That sometimes when you go really high, you can fall really far. Thankfully, I barely avoided breaking an ankle, but it has taught me one important principle about economics. Oftentimes, what goes up ends up coming down. So today we're going to be discussing the stock market. After weeks of profits, are U.S. stock markets setting up for another collapse? That's what we're going to be talking about today, and my answer is absolutely, positively, yes. And there are several reasons for this. Now, before I go further, let me just say I don't think that this will be on the scale that we have seen it before. I don't think we have, basically, we're not as high as we were before, so we can't quite fall so low. But I do believe there will still be a period of trepidation within the stock market that will cause some divots in our growth as we progress. There are 4 reasons I believe this. I want to lay those out for you briefly, and then I'll jump into those. Firstly, that the stabilization of the market is too recent. Secondly, that of the European crisis has caused instability in our markets. Thirdly is that of China, both because that their economy is weakening and also that they've been kind of tinkering around in our stock market in kind of an unethical way. And finally, fourth, this is an election year, and stock markets always react very negatively to election year. So the first point, the stabilization of the market is too recent, and there's a couple of reasons why I think that this will negatively affect our future growth. Reuters reported in September of this past year that there was a 3% fall in the market in 4 days. An absolutely dramatic shift away from the basically the growth that we had seen in late August of last year, just a dramatic fall. And so basically our market is still recovering from the aftershocks of last fall all the way into December. We had another drop December 30th. And so our market is still kind of recovering from those aftershocks. We still haven't made up for the percentages that we lost even as of last fall. So we haven't even climbed up to where we were since the last fall. And it's really been less than really a good 6 months since the last time we had a drop. Secondly, it's only been in the last couple of weeks that we've even seen the trend going up. Yeah, it really only since April, which Fox News reported. Stocks went up 1.1%. So we really only gained back a very small fraction of what we had actually lost. Only that we still lost 2% since last summer. So really there's been very little stabilization in the market recently. And secondly, is sometimes the case that stabilization can actually, at least short-term stabilization, can actually be a bad thing. And before you react negatively to that, let me explain why. There's a principle in economics that says that oftentimes it's better to have a much slower progression of economic success moving forward, moving up by rates of about 1% over a long period of time, than to have dramatic increases in a week followed by dramatic decreases in a week. And the reason is because of the psychological drama that takes place, essentially. When you have dramatic ups, oftentimes the consumer is likely to not save money like he or she would because consumer confidence skyrockets, people go out and spend money, and that's actually how the stock market goes up, is when people start spending money. However, it's that very thing that ends up scaring people because if you're not saving money, the consumer confidence tends to end up being shakier in the long run, and therefore people react more negatively to a decrease in the market and they start to panic. Whereas in generations where people saved more money, they reacted a little bit more stably to decreases in the market. They didn't panic because they had that money tucked away. People that don't save that money, frankly, they don't have that same security, so they tend to panic. Now, another reason why I believe that this is going to be a short-term growth in the market is that the European debt crisis is far from over. Los Angeles Times wrote this past year that there are renewed fears in Europe threaten to derail all the 2012 rallies. I think that pretty much sums my entire speech up right there. That concerns over Europe are basically threatening to destroy all the progress we've made. And I actually, right before we came to this tournament, I read an article online that said that Germany had promised to stick to the euro, and that's just about the worst thing they could have possibly said, because Germany is basically the last sound economy in Europe right now, and so it's kind of like not saving a drowning man by grabbing onto him with your arm, and you're going to get pulled in, especially when the drowning man weighs 5 or 6 times more than you do. That's exactly what Germany is threatening to happen to the German economy. So really, Europe is going to be another big jump that we have to hurdle. Now thirdly, I think China is another reason why we're going to have problems moving forward, and this is because they are tinkering in our markets by creating fictitious companies, getting American investors to invest in those companies, and then basically pulling down the shade that's hiding the fallacy behind those companies. Basically, there is no company, but they set up this fictitious, what looks like a legit company. American investors go in and invest, and then the scammers back in China reap all the benefits, and then in a couple of weeks the company disappears. It never really actually existed. It was about a 3 or 4 week fraud in the American stock market. So that's another thing that's been going on very recently, and the American Congress hasn't been able to properly regulate that as of yet because it's kind of a recent development in our stock market. Those regulations will probably come, but not for a good period of time, especially leading to my fourth point, in an election year. Now, Congress, of course, is going to be backlogged because, and frankly, gridlocked during an election year, because this is when partisanship reaches its ultimate highs during an election year. And secondly, American voters just get very nervous when they start seeing candidates basically at their worst talking to each other. So essentially the best time for American voters is when the politicians aren't talking, and that happens a lot during an election year as the politicians start talking, and that makes people really, really nervous. And we saw during the 2008 elections, there was actually the night of the election, I think there was a 5% fall in the market the night of the election in 2008. So election years are absolutely terrible for economies. So while I do believe that it's definitely good that we're moving in the right direction, I'm not going to say that a 1% increase is a bad thing. I do think we have to take it with a grain of salt. I don't think we're out of the woods entirely yet. I'm just afraid that people who, like me, and when they ski go flying up, I'm afraid that the economy might just take a flop like me. Thank you very much.